Well, artists are key to the city. I mean, the New York City is the creative capital of the world. It makes us who we are. It is the soul of New York City. Without the arts and without a viable arts, culture, we're really like any other city in the world. And we need to keep arts here. So having more housing is the first step that we need to take. The second thing, and I think what you're alluding to, are things like artist studios, rehearsal spaces, performance spaces. So my plans include two things. Number one is, at this time when we have so much vacant commercial office space, we should be thinking very creatively about how we use all that underutilized space for the benefit of artists of all kinds. And then think about what kinds of benefits we can provide to the landlords to be able to incentivize them to allow these new uses. The second thing we need to do is to have more places where artists can work. So, I think about a huge expansion to the open culture program to encompass the parks and other places like that. I'm thinking about bringing the arts education back into the public schools, right? The $18 billion in fair student funding that just got passed should be a great way to do that. But we also need to think about these places where the artists can work. And so I'm thinking about having a rebirth of incubators all around the city for sculptors and welders and metal workers and potters to be able to practice their craft.
Absolutely. One follow-up question, besides the incentives that we could give to the landlords, which I think is really, really important in trying to create more live workspace. Years and years ago, there was the Artists in Residence program, which when we were trying to convert manufacturing spaces in Soho, in particular, the city offered this program, which was a serious program because many people took advantage of it and got into spaces. My uncle, as a result of being an artist, got into a space in Soho, which, he lived in for 40 years. So, in terms of being aggressive, because you hear all the creative people in New York City in the arts, but also in the theater, suffering probably to the greatest degree of, many of the employment sectors, and it is critical for the creative class to stay here. Would you support an aggressive program that you just referenced before that would be, from the beginning of your administration to try to set this up before we lose
Absolutely.
everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a huge interest to me. The question is, how do we do that at scale? Mm-hmm. And also, how do we do that without having artists who become extremely successful, still occupying spaces that are way below market? So mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer in means testing, and to be able to start to transition these spaces over for people who have less, who need it, who can't afford it. And for people who can afford it to go off and find their own spaces.